Oh, hi everyone. Thanks for joining in this morning. I see we've got a couple of folks who've joined the line. We'll just give people a couple of minutes to arrive. We'll be starting shortly. Thank you. Okay, maybe we should get going. I know that there's a few people who have signed up, and part of signing up and registering is to get the recording. So those of you who are here, just to let you know that this session will be recorded. And you can certainly play it back after you didn't catch anything, but those that are here live are going to be able to ask some questions directly and get things clarified. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the Consultant Specialist BC and Bond Consulting Group's Ask a SR&ED Expert webinar for experts and specialists. So this is aimed at those who are doing research. And we did expect Julie Bond to be the presenter today, as the CEO of Bond Consulting. Unfortunately, Julie won't be presenting today as she's undergone an unexpected surgery and is currently recovering at the moment. In her place, I would like to introduce Riyad Ua, who is a senior bond partner at Bond Consulting Group. He has several years of experience in the pharmaceutical sector, and before joining Bond, he gained extensive experience in the medical field, including research in renal oncology. His expertise, both in the pharmaceutical and medical sectors, enables him to deliver high-quality SR&ED claims for bond clients. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Riyad. So I'll let you get going. Riyad, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Lu, for the introduction. Welcome, everybody, to the webinar here today, and I thank you for your time. Today is geared more to our peers in British Columbia, to the Association and the help of the Consultant Specialists of British Columbia. So unfortunately, Julie was not able to present today. However, we will still move forward with our webinar today and undergoing a deep dive into the SR&ED process, who is eligible, and all the requirements pertaining to a successful SR&ED claim with Bond Consulting. So a little bit about SR&ED. So it is a tax credit offered by the government of Canada. It is one of the largest and most generous corporate tax incentives in the country, and it rewards corporations who are achieving or undergoing or striving per se a deeper knowledge in the technologies or science and medicine. So in this positioning, by default, many corporations, or I guess medical corporations, so physicians who are incorporated, are eligible for the program, to be determined, of course, by the requirements that we'll further discuss in later slides. And the positioning really for medical corporations, for medical physicians who are incorporated, is through the advancement of knowledge through a field of medicine. So whatever specialty physician might be in, it is through the advancement of said knowledge after thorough investigation, having a hypothesis, and still not being answered by the available literature or knowledge. The doctor then embarks onto a scientific journey to then elucidate the uncertainty. And through this, through the application process with CRA, corporations and medical corporations would be eligible to take advantage of the incentive program, which is SR&ED. So a few misconceptions. So these are things, real questions that are asked by physicians before even hearing about SR&ED. There is a bit of a funny, dichotomy where it is the largest incentive program, tax incentive program in the country. However, a lot of physicians are unaware, and many accountants as well are unaware of the program. So we hear a multitude of questions, as in, I'm not doing enough research. SR&ED is only tailored to technological projects, IT companies, startups. I was never told about this by my accountant, and flat out, I don't think I'm eligible, or a friend told me that they were eligible. So in the same vein, I would not be eligible. So these are a few misconceptions that we aim to dispel here through this webinar, and hopefully, get more physicians to apply for the program through Bond. And so the most crucial thing for the program really is meeting the criteria. And it really starts with having a scientific or medical uncertainty within your field of science that is not answered. So it is not answered through a literature research that you have accomplished before embarking on the research journey. After speaking with experts in the field, the answer is still not obtained. And so you come up with a study, idea or scientific question that you may have that you would like to have answered through a scientific or medical advancement. And this, in the same vein, triggers a systematic investigation afterwards. And so to start off with, we have the two main different studies that a lot of physicians undergo within their respective fields. So we have medical studies or social studies. A lot of doctors, unfortunately, don't understand the fact that we are not in a position to say if a study is good or bad. It's more so about fine-tuning and tailoring the studies and picking the studies that are more suited for the program. So a lot of studies per se about the medical system, efficiencies, hospital staffing, questionnaires about physician performance, patient adherence to certain programs, public health, economics, cost cutting, cost saving. So all these topics are very essential research topics within each individual field. However, they're not perfectly suited for the program. And so this is why there's tends to be confusion amongst physicians where they do have research, they do have work done, but they find themselves in a position that they're not eligible for the program just yet. So in order to qualify a clearly defined hypothesis in the field of medical science that really studies either patient outcomes or clinical outcomes would suit the program a lot better. And so we take a deep dive here a bit more with regards to the structure, the financial structure of research and that medical corporations would see here and there. So a third-party payment, I personally know from experience that in British Columbia, this is quite rare. This is much more prevalent in Ontario. However, it's important to underline because it does still exist at UBC of note. So a third-party payment would be, for example, a amount of money that the corporation or yourself as an individual would pay the institution to perform research on your behalf. And later on, you would get a slip from the institution that would prove that you spent X amount of money on said projects, and you can then claim this payment, which just becomes a third-party payment, to the government to then get a tax credit back. So a third-party payment is baked into the corporate tax regime and is also baked into the SR&ED claim as well. So having a third-party payment does not per se eliminate you from the program. It actually enhances your SR&ED claim by being able to take advantage of a higher expenditure of research and a higher research output as well. And so the independent SR&ED, like I mentioned, can still be claimed in addition to any TPP contributions. Usually, from my personal experience in SR&ED, these are pretty small contributions. I've seen maybe contributions between 5,000 to 20,000 in a given corporate year. This may translate to an increase of SR&ED claim by, a factor of 20 to 25%. On the overall claim amount. So it is good to know that you can actually claim both SR&ED and a third-party payment if you are, in this conversation, you are receiving, or I guess you are paying third-party payments to your institution to perform research. The second alternative as well that we have, or that we see day-to-day in SR&ED, again, this notion is a bit less of a factor in British Columbia from experience. However, it is still, worthy to mention. It is an AFP, so an alternative funding plan. So it's a complex compensation models that are used to provide protected time and research time for academics and for physicians that are associated with a institution, as in UBC or UVic or what it might be. So these are protected times where a physician would have to forego their clinical hours to then spend, if it's 1 day, 2 or 3 days a week, on specifically research activities. So the way this pertains to SR&ED is that these blocks of time tend to be contractually paid to the researcher and to the academic and the physician. So in essence, having an AFP or having a block of time that is dedicated to research and it is paid by institution. So this time spent on research projects would not be eligible for SR&ED. So in this essence, having an AFP reduces your ability to claim SR&ED. However, there are some workarounds in the sense that if we are targeting a project or two that you may have that is associated with an AFP, we could potentially claim hours that are spent outside of the contractually obligated time, as in weekends or evenings. However, just to keep in mind that any project tied to an AFP would have a financially reduced aspect with regards to the SR&ED claim and the reduced aspect of time available to claim overall for each individual projects. In this case, for AFPs or for contracts that are blocked off for physicians, an analyst will be able to guide you with either selecting projects that fall outside of this contractual obligated time, or like I mentioned, just being able to fine tune and pick the right amount of hours that are allocated for the project that are happening outside of the block of time being paid by the institution already. So I went through this. So we are a pioneer in this sense in terms of specialties and being able to disseminate whether you have an AFP and whether we can claim it or not. So this is one of the advantages of dealing with bond consulting, where we have seen a multitude of examples and case studies with physicians across the country with different contractual obligations and whatnot. So having an experienced team behind you assisting with the SR&ED claim is what we can offer here at Bond. And so we have the second batch of, well, I guess the first introduction in terms of what a physician may be doing in terms of research investigations already before even hearing about SR&ED. Clinical trials, sponsored clinical trials are, of course, a very popular way to investigate and things that most physicians are involved in. So scientifically, when it comes to SR&ED, there's nothing better than a clinical trial. It's one of the gold standards. The activities involved in a clinical trial are always SR&ED eligible. However, they're a little bit more financially complex. The rules around clinical trials pertaining to SR&ED specifically are complex in the sense that there is some compensation involved with the private sponsor related to certain activities. So, of course, if many of you may know that, for example, patient recruitment may be paid by patient. Any reporting of adverse events might also be compensated. Any time associated with these things may be compensated. So just as I was speaking about the AFP in the previous slide, having an experienced team behind you to help you and to help us as well figure out exactly which hours can we claim that were not compensated by the sponsor, and being able to claim the right activities that were not paid by the sponsor really helps solidify the SR&ED claim and the positioning around a clinical trial project that would be claimed. Because I do see it in my day-to-day as well with a lot of physicians across the country where they only have sponsored trials to claim, and that is their sole activity. And some of those physicians may feel that, by looking at the documentation online or being told by other colleagues that they're not eligible for the SR&ED program. So we as the experts are here to tell you that that is not the case. It's just that the level of complexity goes up a little bit and requires a bit more work that will be done by ourselves, of course, to help us and you, guide ourselves to a successful claim by claiming the right activities and the right time as well. So like I mentioned, there's a higher chance of audit with clinical trials because the CRA, of course, understands that most clinical trials are sponsored in Canada and that most activities are compensated. So the documentation expectation is much higher. If it were to be audited, it'd be a bit more complex, a lot of documentation to provide. But that is something that I will go over in future slides with regards to audit specifics. But that is something that can be overcome, of course, by having a strong, experienced team leading the charge through Bond. So there also are physicians out there who are doing investigator-led non-sponsored trials. So these could be trials that are investigator-led and investigator-initiated. Again, the eligibility criteria is met in terms of science, which is amazing. The chance of audit is still high because it does still fall under the umbrella of a clinical trial. But however, again, like I mentioned before, having an experienced team with Bond and experienced analysts who have claimed projects like this before, who have been approved by the CRA in the past through the same scenarios, does help fluidify the process quite a lot. And then we have a lot of physicians who receive stipends. So the important question here is who exactly received the stipend? We have to disseminate between the actual individual physician and the corporation as an entity as well. So for tax purposes, you would have to know whether the stipend was received by the NPC, so the medical corporation that you own, or yourself as an individual. So time being paid by stipend cannot be claimed if it was received personally. So that would have to be backed out. So once we do the calculation of the overall hours spent in a given corporate year across all activities, any amount and time related to the stipend would have to be backed out from the total time. It tends to not be, from my personal experience, stipends tend to be a less of a known fact in British Columbia, although it could potentially arise. And usually when it does, it's a smaller amount. It's kind of like an AFP, like I mentioned before. If you do have protected time or a stipend, it tends to only be maybe one business day or, a few $1,000s, maybe up to $10,000 to $20,000. So if we were to claim something like this, it would have to be listed as government assistance. It would have to be deducted from eligible expenditures, of course, which we do in our calculations. And there are some specific reportings to be done within the tax forms, which is something that we offer as well. And then we have grants. So grants, of course, are the bread and butter in the research world within the physician community. So, grants complicate the SR&ED process a little bit because in some instances they are considered as government assistance, and they may be deducted in the overall pool of eligible expenditures for SR&ED. Their important questions are exactly who received the grant. So was it an individual, so the physician himself or herself, a corporation, or was it the institution as a whole? So was it the Department of Physiology at UBC, or was it the doctor himself as an individual, or was it the corporation that you as a physician own? So again, this is another storm that we can help you navigate, of course, once we have the documentation, the contracts in place. That is something that every analyst here at Bond will know how to navigate. Another question that arises a lot when it comes to physician is time tracking. So it's a bit of a touchy subject in the sense that the CRA and everybody in the field understands that for a lot of physicians out there, it is quite difficult to time track exactly every single activity going down for your research. And it's very difficult to time track across multiple projects. And so the CRA may accept substitutes for timesheets and for time tracking, calendars, count, meeting records, meeting minutes, and any other reasonable documentation pertaining to recording of activities or time throughout the year. Again, for first-time claimants, it is difficult to justify every single hour for every single project for every single activity. So the documentation requirements and the overall timeshare requirement is quite loose for first-time claimants. However, over time, as experts in this field, we do recommend installing or adhering to some sort of a time tracking scheme throughout the fiscal year by maybe claim number 3 or 4. It would be nice for most physicians to install a calendar from week to week or from month to month, which outlines specific activities going down for each project. So that if it were ever to go up into audits, ourselves and the physician would be able to clearly justify the hours claimed and avoid any further questioning by the CRA in terms of their time tracking. So intellectual property is also a question that we get a lot from physicians. A lot of projects are done in collaboration. Multiple authors come into place as well when it comes to publication. So the intellectual property ownership in SR&ED is complex, of course, especially when sponsors are involved or other corporations that you are associated with are involved. So one party contracts another party. So this complicates the SR&ED claim a little bit. However, in my personal experience, when it comes to SR&ED claims for physicians, intellectual property is quite easy to navigate. The trick questions is really, is there another Canadian entity or another Canadian company that can contractually restrict your use or the knowledge that was gained through the project? Are you actually allowed to use the knowledge that was developed by the project? And can you put your name on any resulting publications or findings? So if you have any input, or if you have a contract that does not allow any input or any reporting, if per se you have a sponsored trial with a private sponsor, a GSK or Johnson & Johnson, who does not allow you to have any input contractually, who does state that they have full control of the IP and any results and data generated by the project, that complicates the ability to claim said project. So these are little things that we ourselves as analysts think about and ask during client meetings to make sure that we're selecting the proper projects that are eligible and that fit the bill when it comes to IP. Joint ventures, so it's an important aspect to speak about. Rare as well, but also quite it does happen from time to time. So joint ventures are often misunderstood and involve complex shred policies. So a true joint venture is defined as two or more non-associated corporations that are collaborating on a single project without contracting each other, and then sharing the knowledge that was acquired together in tandem. So this can also apply to in academic settings with multiple investigators, co-investigators contributing to the same research, and non-associated business collaborators. So when it comes to SR&ED, the most notable example is if we have two colleagues from the same department that are working on the same project. Both could be co-investigators or PIs, if you will, or co-PIs. Through SR&ED, we can claim the same projects for both physicians. We would just have to make sure that we are labeling the projects clearly as associated or as joint ventures in the T661 in the corporate filings once it is presented to the CRA. So processing time. So when it comes to submitting a SR&ED claim, depends on several factors. Once the claim is prepared and sent away to the CRA. So are you a first-time claimant? Is this a repeat claimant? Was the tax return with SR&ED filed before or after the initial filing? So when it comes to first-time claimants, when prepared by bond, of course, we typically see a processing time of 8 to 16 weeks. For repeat claimants, we see a much quicker turnaround once the CRA is familiar with your work and excuse me, and with the work presented, the processing times drop dramatically by the second and third year. So we're used to seeing claims that initially took maybe 8 to 16 weeks the first year. The second year, we've seen approval in 1 day or 2 days. So it really varies by physician to physician, by research to research. But overall, it is a pretty quick turnaround for claims. The CRA has a limit of 90 days of processing for each claim. So they are encouraged to finish their processing time before that. So on average, if I were to, to select a time frame, I would say between 30 to 40 business days is usually what we see for most claims. So we have two different types of claims that go in terms of how they're structured. So we have an amendment and a non-amendment. So SR&ED claims can be filed with the original tax return or as a retroactive amendment to the original tax file due to the retrospective nature of the program. So as a physician, if per se you have a December 31st fiscal year end for your corporation, and we are currently, as we stand in 2026, we will be able to claim both the 2024 fiscal year and the 2025 fiscal year. So we can go back as far as 18 months from your previously last fiscal year end to claim SR&ED. So we can submit an amendment. So if, for example, in 2024, of course, you file your taxes with your accountant, it's a sign and deal. It's signed and a done deal. We, as SR&ED experts, can go back through your accountant, of course, and perform an amendment, which involves just sending the SR&ED schedules that pertain to the tax return and getting a SR&ED claim done through there. And then we also have an e-file. So usually if you are very close to doing your corporate taxes with your accountant, we would just swoop in at the last step with your accounting team to simply embed our SR&ED information into the tax return just before your accountant finalizes all the information ready for the CRA. So reconciliation, so once the shred claim is approved by the CRA, you would get a notice of assessment by the CRA, just like you would for any tax return. At Bond, we have a very specialized and dedicated team that are trained to review the reconciliation packages and that are trained to provide you with exactly where every dollar of the shred credit went and was applied to. So sometimes you would get per se, a refund of X amount that does not necessarily reflect the amount of shred credits that were claimed originally. So we are responsible and we are trained to exactly tell you where each dollar was allocated. Because sometimes if you have a corporate tax balance, if you have source deductions, if you have penalties or anything owing to the CRA will automatically assign the shred credits to whatever balance you owe before allowing you to reap the shred refunds. So we will be able to tell you exactly where every penny of the shred claim was allocated to. And sometimes, of course, sometimes some accountants do not account for shreds, so it would lead to double taxation. So our reconciliation team here at Bond, we're able to manage and make sure that everything is flowing accordingly when it comes to the refunds and the credits being allocated by the CRA at the source. So the biggest crux really when it comes to shred is audits. So a lot of physicians get scared of the word audit. I mean, we do too. We don't like audits, but it is part of the program. So we tend to, recommend to never proceed through a shred audit by yourself. If physicians do choose Bond, we have a very strong audit package and audit team that is there to support physicians through every step of the way when it comes to an audit. Because auto representation is really crucial when it comes to shred. It involves a complex network of documentation, of communication with the CRA, and a really rigorous preparation of documentation relevant to the audit and the project that were claimed. Some audits may take 3 to 6 months from start to completion in terms of when it was triggered, documentation preparation, the meeting, and then the final results. In more complex and disputed cases, we have seen cases to be extended to between 6 to 2 years. So our team here at Bond, in terms of expertise and knowledge, we were trained and we have accumulated enough experience to know exactly what to do when it comes to shred claims to avoid an audit at the source. So we always have audit defense in our minds when preparing a claim. We are conservative in nature when it comes to not being overzealous with hours or claiming expenditures. So we do understand the requirements that the CRA has when it comes to audits, and we try our best when crafting claims to avoid an audit at all costs. But sometimes they happen even while being conservative. So the CRA, being the governing body, they are at their discretion to audit any case that comes to their desk. But just to say that we are prepared for any questioning or audits that come from the CRA due to our rigorous program that we have here at Bond in terms of audit planning and audit preparation. And lastly, this is the highest degree of contention, if you will, with the CRA when it comes to a shred claim. It would go to, so if we were to come down with an audit and we do not agree with the result of the audit due to X, Y, and Z, we would go through what we call an appeals and tax courts process. So back in 2012 to 2015, this is where a lot of British Columbia physicians were hit very hard by the CRA when it came to shred claims. I have personally heard by a lot of your colleagues in British Columbia through my own clients that they used to claim shred, but due to this clamp down that the CRA operated between 2012 and 2015, the audits came down hard, a lot of denials. They decided to never claim shred ever again, just due to what I've mentioned before with the complexity of the audit scheme, documentation process, the scrutiny and whatnot. A lot of physicians, for some reason, or I'm not sure exactly why, but British Columbia was the province that was the hardest hit during this clampdown. We're not really sure exactly why, if there was a firm that was in British Columbia leading the charge in terms of shred that they were targeting. But we became experts in and around this time. So we really hit our strong force in terms of being the experts in this country. And, just after this clampdown period, after learning exactly why the CRA was clamping down on claims and learning from the documentation, the policy that came after this, we were able to structure and position ourselves here at Bond to really navigate through the process and come with a new process that would be audit proof and audit defensible, of course. So appeals cases are rare, so 1 to 2% of overall cases go to appeals, and tax court even less than that. So it makes sense for larger claims. So we have, personally here at Bond, we have gone through this process to defend larger claims that were worthy to defend, and we had the documentation enough to go the full length and win the cases. For the vast majority of medical corporations that are claiming SR&ED, this will not be the case. Over 99% of cases that are done for medical corporations are approved as filed, and the remaining percentage or two that do go to audit also get approved as, after audit. So this is not a big, worry whatsoever for physicians in general, just something that we like to, pride ourselves in, that we like our clientele to know that we are, positioned in the sense that we are ready to go the whole mile for our clients and defend cases that are worthy to defend. So another question as well that comes up for some clients is, do I need to switch accountants? So the answer, of course, is no. So we do not position ourselves as accountants. We are simply consultants, tax consultants, who are experts in the policy, and we provide consultant work that works in tandem with your accounting services. So we have excellent relationships with our physicians and their accountants as well, because it is, crucial to the process and making sure that the experience is as smooth as possible for ourselves and for the physicians as well. And so it's a mutual beneficial relationship that we have, where even though it is part of the tax program, our services are really, related to a specific subsection of the tax program. And we always ask questions, and we always ask for advice when it comes to specific tax positions with accountants. So we work greatly with your accounting systems, whatever it may be. So the answer is always no. You don't have to switch accountants when it comes to claiming SR&ED. And in terms of numbers, so average SR&ED claims across the country, so it tends to vary. So, the biggest determining factor of a SR&ED claim is the salary you receive from your corporation as an employee. So this, of course, varies from physician to physician. Some physicians are on the lower end of 25,000, and we regularly see claims as well as up, as high as 200,000 for every given year. So physicians that are managing larger clinical trials, corporations that have a lot of employees, subcontractors, those factors, of course, increase the SR&ED claim amount, because it allows us to claim more employees and more expenditures. But even for corporations that only have one individual, so one physician working and receiving a salary, the claim size varies, but it tends to be between $25,000 and $200,000 per given year. So specified owners and cap limits. So specified owners is of course relating to the aspect of being the physician who owns the corporation. So the expenditures are currently capped at $340,000 per year per owner. So this does not mean the salary of $340,000 per year. It's more so related to the actual expenditure that we would calculate from a salary that would go to SR&ED. So if we were to take a percentage of your salary that was specifically allocated to research, that salary is currently capped at $340,000. So this cap goes up every year, which is great news. But there's no actual limit that you can pay yourself when it comes to claiming SR&ED. We have seen physicians that claim or that pay themselves, $1 million, $2 million a year. This does not inhibit your ability to claim SR&ED whatsoever. And then we have the question of salary versus dividends. So MPCs, so medical corporations, often declare dividends for their employees, which is a completely fair and normal thing to do when it comes to tax planning. Relating to SR&ED specifically, there is a real loss when it comes to doing it this way. So we tend to just simply advise clients and advise accountants to find a middle ground. So if eliminating dividends is not an option, we do advise to search a personal tax liability. From the personal tax liability standpoint, we ask to find a perfect balance to optimize the SR&ED claim by being able to reverse those dividends into salary. And the way that we do this is we may recommend a wages payable. So wages payable is simply reversing some income from dividends to salary within a given time period. So like I mentioned before, if you have a fiscal year end of December 31st, we have until June 30th of the following year to potentially reverse any dividends and to increase salary, if, of course, it makes sense on the overall picture of taxation on the accounting side and on the signing side and the SR&ED claim side as well, if it makes sense to increase the SR&ED claim to maybe offset some corporate tax balance and being able to push the claim forward in a bit more of a fluid way. So like I mentioned, we can always adjust your compensation scheme. I mean, we would not be doing that directly. We'll just advise the accounting team that you have to adjust and provide numbers. And the ultimate decision always falls on both the counsel, so the accountants, and yourself as a physician to decide whether or not it is a good idea to reverse some of that money and convert it into true salary, especially if the T2 has not been filed yet. So gross negligence. So this is the boogeyman of our industry. So this is something that we strive to never have to deal with ever. So it's a major policy shift that's recently been into place. So historic approach has been that for the last 40 years, most SR&ED claims that were denied did not result in penalties. Under the new penalty regime, if a claim is denied and a claimant is found to be grossly negligent when it comes to reporting of the SR&ED information, the numbers, the allocation of time, the corporation would be subjected to a 50% financial penalty of the denied amount. So in a concrete example, so if a $200,000 claim is denied under these terms, the CRA would levy a real $100,000 penalty against the corporation. So this is something that, as experts and bond leading the charge in the country for the last 15 years, it has never happened to us. And we planned and we work in a fashion that we never want this to happen to anyone, including ourselves, and most importantly, the clients that we have. So we do not operate in any matter that would prompt the CRA to take a gross negligence approach to our claims. But this is something that we have seen or that we have heard of, at least in the field, by other firms who are a bit less experienced, or who are just reporting false information to CRA to potentially get a higher gain for themselves. So just something to be mindful of when it comes to SR&ED consulting in general. So like I mentioned, so gross negligence can include claiming ineligible projects or previously denied projects, claiming individuals that did not participate in the trial or were not eligible in terms of activities. So we've seen, for example, some other firms claiming bookkeeping. We've seen some other firms claiming the accounting team of their corporation when it comes to the SR&ED projects, which is absolutely ridiculous. We've also seen some inflating of time or expenses in an egregious manner. And so this is why we do not, take these things lightly when it comes to planning your SR&ED claim. We have a diligent process here at BOD that allows us to claim within the rules and regulations of the CRA to avoid any mention of gross negligence for ourselves and for yourself as well. And again, just the things to be wary of within the SR&ED market out there. Some consultants would charge an upfront retainer. Some accounting firms put aside a junior shred analyst that is not really familiar with the shred policy, with very little experience, assigned to your case. Many shred firms as well outsource the shred work. So it's either they would either get the physician themselves to write the technical aspect of the claim, or they would just offshoot the technical writing to third-party websites or third-party individuals across the world that are not aware or that are not really, knowledgeable enough to do the technical portion of the claim. And when it comes to resourcing, resources rather, sorry, CRA tracking, some firms out there do not communicate with their clients in terms of the status of their claim, and they're just left in the dark. Ghosting, so many firms will ghost you, will not respond to the CRA if the claim is audited, which results in lost time and lost efforts for everybody involved. Some unethical practices out there from some firms will they will even charge you for services that would lead to a denied claim. Like I mentioned before, so most firms do not bother with a robust evidence department or audit defense at all. They may not provide orientation or guidance, or they may not even show up to help you out when it comes to audit defense. And then reconciliation. So you will receive a transparent tax reconciliation with bond. Some other firms will not be able to perform this process. So that's something that we pride ourselves in. And so, less reputable firms do take advantage of these things when it comes to physicians because of their lack of awareness, or just because of the lack of awareness with regard to the programs. This is something that we stay very far away from as the leading firm in the country when it comes to these practices. And so a few technical considerations when it comes to the overall shred claim. So of course, the number one thing is you must be incorporated. So individual physicians that are not incorporated cannot benefit from the program. We have referred a lot of physicians that were not incorporated at first to first get incorporated and then do a full fiscal year of work. And then the following year, we were able to claim their shred work. So the number one thing to do, or the number one requirement to be eligible for the program is, of course, to be incorporated. And then from that standpoint, the employees or yourself as a physician, you must receive a T4 income from the corporation to claim as R&D expenditure. It's the most generous portion of the program. So, the higher the salary, the higher the shred credit will be received by the applicant. Dividends are not eligible, of course. As a reminder, the shred claim is part of the corporate tax return. We can always go back retrospectively 18 months for any shred activities that were completed and to file an application. And we do have an 18-month deadline for every claim. So like I mentioned before, if as a physician you have a corporation with a fiscal year of December 31st, 2025, we would have until June 30th of 2027 to file the claim and claim those activities that were occurring in the 2025 fiscal year. And then just a flow chart really just describing the shred claim process with bond. So there is an initial consultation with an assessment specialist whom I will present later on as members of our team, which will help you determine the eligibility of your work. It's a efficient way to really off the bat be able to give you an idea of what is eligible work, present yourself in terms of your research, your involvement, and from that standpoint, we will be able to determine whether or not it is worth your time to proceed with a shred claim. Once that is determined, an analyst will be assigned, and a comprehensive technical interview would proceed with the analyst. So a deep dive into your research, the technicalities, the foundational structure of your research, the timeline, and the actual science will be discussed in these comprehensive interviews. Following the interview, we would have the analyst prepare the technical report. So this involves preparing a report summarizing your projects, outlining the medical uncertainty of the CRA to make sure that we are clear about the uncertainties that you are trying to elucidate through your projects, and clearly defining everything to the CRA in about it's a 5 to 10 page report outlining every single project that you may have, and clearly explain to the CRA what exactly is going on with your projects. We would then proceed with the analysis of your eligible costs. So this would involve looking over your financial statements and your corporate tax return, your T2, to make sure that we are optimizing your returns and optimizing the SR&ED claim to the best of our knowledge. We would then prepare all necessary forms, and the final step on the client side would involve the signature of the SR&ED forms, authorizing us to go ahead and send the tax reports and the tax claims. The claim is then submitted to the CRA or through your accountant. We would vigilantly look at your claim once received by the CRA and track every step of the way of their reviewing process. And once the CRA has completed their process, we'll be able to, from the moment that is approved, we'll be able to let you know of the status of the claim and proceed with the reconciliation. So I mentioned this before at the beginning of the presentation, the 3 potential scenarios that would happen following the CRA review. So the first most common result that we pride ourselves the most here at Bond through our 99.9% success rate is the claim accepted as filed, so AAF. So accepted as filed just means that the CRA looked at your claim once it was received through Bond and determined that it meets the criteria, it is eligible work, the expenditures are eligible, so it was fully approved, and they will move on with the release of funds. The second outcome is also an approval, but it involves an extra step. So it's called an FTCAS, so it's a first-time claimant seminar, if you will. So the claim is approved. However, the CRA would like to proceed with an initial meeting with the physician just to go over the SR&ED basics and provide you with a general idea of the SR&ED program and its requirements, and quote unquote set you up for success for future claims in case you didn't know after submitting your first claim. So FTCAS are also rare. They come in waves as for first-time claimants. So this, again, to reiterate, it only happens after your first claim has been sent to the CRA. And like I said, they are rare. There are some times where in a quarter we get 0, and in the next quarter we get 10. So it does vary. It's not a negative connotation whatsoever if you do receive an FTCAS once applying for SR&ED. It's just at random from the CRA side where they have to meet their quotas, and so they just like to do these meetings with physicians and any applicant, really for the SR&ED program, to go over a seminar explaining the program in depth. And lastly is the CRA review. So the third option is an audit notification from the CRA and from the reviewer, and then I will go further into depth with the audit process right here. So a CRA auditor would call you as the applicant or as the claimant per se. We would ask that you would take down their name and their phone number and to notify us right away. And then from that point on, we take care of the process from start to finish. So we would call them back, we would schedule a meeting, we would ask for the clarifying questions in terms of documentation that they would need, and we would proceed with our audit process from A to Z. So we would then proceed with the evidence department, who will work to collect, organize, and prepare all the documentation pertaining to your research and the requirements of the CRA. We would then send documentation to the CRA through a secure portal. Before the audit, we also offer a coaching session with our audit experts and the analyst that was working on your case to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of the medical uncertainty, to make sure that we are presenting the right information to the CRA, and to make sure that we are prepared, and especially the physician is prepared to answer the questions that the CRA may have pertaining to their claim. So a meeting will be scheduled virtually, of course, with the CRA for the actual audit. It's a 2 to 3 hour meeting with the CRA, and the analyst that worked on your case and the audit expert that we have here on staff would be there during the audit to support you. So we will be present in the audit as a CRA will be asking you questions. Following the audit, the CRA may ask for more clarifying questions or more documentation. We would step in here as well and offer you, counsel and services in terms of collecting the information and sending it back to CRA. Following this entire review, the CRA would review the information presented to the claim and the audit process, and they would issue a proposal afterwards in terms of the options that I mentioned before as well. So the claim could be accepted under audit. So the claim that was sent in initially by the analyst before the audit would simply be approved after audit, so nothing would change. And your refund would then go to processing. And then we would just simply do the reconciliation process as we were as per usual. And if not approved, which is quite rare, bond will of course assist with the rebuttals and appeals until we win your case. So we are, really tenacious to this aspect. We believe in our process here at Bond, and so we go the full length when it comes to defending your cases. And this is where I invite Dr. Lowe to present this very enticing offer that we have to offer in collaboration with the services. So Dr. Lowe.
Thanks, Riyad. Thanks for going over all the details. And I know this webinar is kind of more of an advanced one compared to the first introductory one that we did. So Consultant Specialist of BC is happy to be working with Bond. And just to let the group know that we have done a lot of due diligence. A lot of the things that Riyad has talked about are concerns with, I guess, who's helping you prepare your SR&ED application and submission. And of course, there are certainly lots of steps involved, but Bond Consulting certainly simplifies it. And as CSBC, we did go through a lot of reference checking and due diligence. So we have found Bond to be a reliable provider. And we did actually speak, or I spoke to actually 8 references who have used Bond in BC to do their SR&ED credit application and had very good things to say. As a result of our collaboration, what we've been able to negotiate is a situation where you can actually involve Bond Consulting in an application, and we've got it set up where there's no risk. That is, if the submission does not get you a refund, then there's no fee to be paid. So Bond only gets paid when you do get a refund. So that kind of puts you in a better situation that the risk is not there. And when there is a fee to be paid, because you have gotten a refund, we've also negotiated a discount that ranges between $250 to $750 off of the fee. And that range is there because of a chance of a higher refund. There's a bigger discount. If it's a smaller refund, it's a smaller discount because the fees are commensurate with how much you get back as well. There's a group code that you can use when you're talking with Bond. And if you submit that, then you qualify for the free consultation, the no risk approach to the submission, as well as for the $250 to $750 off. I will also put a website into the chat that you can go to. And at that website, you will also see the code, as well as a previous webinar that was done. And in that previous webinar, a little bit more introductory type information. And I'd like to, I guess, I'm not sure if you're finishing off yet, but we can certainly open it up to questions at any time with the group that's here if you've got something specific.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe. And I think, yes, you are correct. I think it will be concluding very soon. Just a way to contact us and our team that will be responsible for doing the intake for any prospective clients who are interested in pursuing SR&ED with Bond. So we have our sales manager, Olga Semenova, and her team of Holden Hersko and Jonas Sadin here as SR&ED professional assessments and professional assessors that would help you guide and provide you the enough information to decide whether or not the SR&ED program is right for you. So please feel free to follow any of the links that we have here on this slide, and also reaching out to Dr. Lowe as well for any information with partnerships and additional materials as well. And lastly, before concluding, just a few facts about Bond. Being in business for over 20 years, of course, proudly Canadian owned and operated. We've generated over $300 million in SR&ED refunds for our clients since 2005. multiple award-winning shred consulting firm, a team of experts. So we have on staff, we have medical scientists, technologists, engineers, and a staff that's well versed in a myriad of technological and scientific sectors. We have an enormous amount of testimonials on our website and Google reviews as well, that attest to our professionalism and the way we operate as a shred firm. Being a shred firm is all about trust between ourselves, the clients, the accounting team that you may have in the CRA, and we pride ourselves on being the most transparent and the most effective and professional firm out there when it comes to shred consulting. And so thank you so much again for everybody that was able to make it today for the meeting and the webinar, and the ones who will be watching this in the future. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have pertaining to the presentation today.
If there's any questions out there, I guess now is the time. And I guess while folks are thinking about the questions and things like that, I'll just bring up something that I know oftentimes comes up and just want you to, I guess, maybe speak to it a little bit. I know it is difficult to get the medical specialists to really submit and apply for SR&ED. Part of it is there's a belief that it's quite complicated and or they don't qualify, that kind of thing. But maybe as a simple test, if someone does have a medical corporation and they have actually got a publication out there in a peer-reviewed journal, I've heard that that almost guarantees that you qualify and can get a refund. Maybe you can speak to a little bit about that, because I know a lot of folks have published, but they don't even apply.
Yes, of course. So that is the bread and butter. So being a published author, especially as a principal investigator, so if you're a first or last author, or even a co-investigator in the middle list of the author list, as long as, if we scroll down to the bottom of the publication and we see the implication of the various authors, if you're involved in the writing, the editing, the project design, data collection, data analysis, manuscript review. So if you're involved in any of these eligible activities when it comes to SR&ED, you are eligible for the program. So being a published author is the gold standard when it comes to applying for SR&ED. The only criteria that I have is just making sure the project, the published work, is eligible work within the eyes of the SR&ED program itself. So having a medical uncertainty, is it patient outcomes based? Is it clinical outcomes based? We're making sure that it's not qualitative work or hospital administration, or if it's not cost reduction services applying for the hospital. So all these things to keep in mind once going through the vetting process with our sales team. But yes, being a published author is definitely the gold standard when applying to SR&ED.
Okay. I don't see any questions yet. I know you also mentioned that there was quite a range in, I guess, what the SR&ED refund is. What would you say it's weighted towards? You've ranged up to 200,000. I'm sure that's probably not the common one, but what is kind of like generally what you're seeing quite frequently?
I would say $60,000 is the most frequent amount that we see here at Bond. It really depends on the percentage of time allocated to SR&ED by each individual physician. So this varies greatly. So some physicians may spend 15 to 20 hours of their free time on a given week on SR&ED projects or research projects in general, which would translate to an allocation of upwards of 40%. And we have some physicians on the lower end who maybe allocate, 25% of their time to SR&ED projects. So the percentage of time really factors the claim amount. And then the most important factor in determining claim amount is actually just the T4 salary. So whatever the doctor pays themselves from the corporation is what is going to dictate the claim value at the end of the day. So as a physician, if you pay yourself $100,000, $150,000, you might see yourself on the quote unquote lower end, or more what we call conservative end of the ladder. So in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. And if you are a physician that pays yourself a bit more, so closer to 250, 350, 400, you would see your claim value shoot up as well, close to that six-figure range.
Okay, sounds like there are people leaving it on the table, which I'm not sure why that happens. But hopefully we can encourage our members to participate. And I know that this is an incentive that Canada has put out there to really incentivize researchers to do that research, contribute to to fact-finding and answering research questions in Canada. So it certainly is a government program that is meant to incentivize and not to be punitive in any way, but still a lot of people aren't taking advantage of it.
Of course, and it's not a very well discussed program because this year are not going to start placing billboards on the side of highways advertising for this type of program, but it is an incentive-based program, so it is meant to reward physicians who are accomplishing a great load of work in the scientific realm, who are answering medical uncertainties, or answering medical questions that are not being met before their investigative work. It's meant to reward all that unpaid time that is being spent on weekends and evenings, outside of clinical hours, outside of contractually obligated hours, that are being spent doing very important work in the realm of medical science. So that is what the purpose of the program it really is. It's really to reward, financially these physicians who are spending X amount of hours on zero payments, right? So they're not getting compensated for these hours. So it's really meant to incentivize these physicians to keep going in their work and provide them with the necessary supports to keep going in their research endeavors.
Can you also clarify if T4 payments paid to employees would qualify? So if the medical corp is paying your employee to participate in research, not the doctor themselves, does that also
Yes.
qualify?
It does qualify. So the only caveat is that the employee that is being compensated for research has to be involved in the projects that are being claimed. So we do ask for documentation and whatnot once you are meeting with the analyst to further corroborate and acquire that evidence in case the CRO would ask any further questions. But generally speaking, yes. So if you have a research associate, a research assistant that is helping you with data collection, data analysis, or manuscript writing or revisions, if you are paying this employee X amount of money through a T4, we can claim both their time and their T4 salary being paid to the corporation, which in turn would increase the value of the claim, through this method.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't realize that as well, because
Yes.
many researchers, especially physicians who are too busy, often do hire research assistants, research associates, and sometimes they get shared. I know
Yeah.
that research associates may work on 3 or 4 different projects for several specialists and
Yeah.
not just for one. And they're all, of course, contributing to that research assistant salary. And therefore, that all kind of play and be claimed. Well, if there are no questions from the group here, maybe we will wrap it up. Any last words before we sign off, Riyad?
No, I just want to thank you guys for being able to attend today and yourself, Dr. Lu, for setting this up. Very grateful and gracious for your time and for your efforts and allowing us to partner with your services and being able to give us a platform here today to be able to, present ourselves as the leading experts of SR&ED in the country. And again, if any physicians who are present here today have any further questions or like a further deep dive with their specific situation, Olga here would be more than happy to assist and direct you to the proper services and provide you with the steps to substantiate a SR&ED claim.
Thanks, Riyad. That's excellent. And I'd like to thank the team for putting this together and compiling all of this information for the group. That's been very helpful. And I know those that are reviewing the recording will get a lot of information out of it as well. But certainly contact the Bond Consulting Group. The contact information is there and can be seen on the website to book an appointment. And Consultant Specialists of BC is looking for ways to provide as much support and benefits to our members as possible. So we're looking for, different ways to support in a more tangible manner, in addition to the advocacy work that we do for specialists, and certainly our advocacy and work on the waitlist management issues that continues to be ongoing as we try to improve access to specialists for the people of BC. So certainly CSBC is working hard on that, and we encourage you to join in and participate in that as well. I'm happy to receive any questions or contacts from folks if you'd like to get involved. So with that, we'd like to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Riyad and the Bond Consulting Group team. Thanks very much for all the information and the help that you provide to our members. With that, hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and hope you enjoy what's rest left of the day for here, and wrapping up early enough that you can still take advantage of that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.